Hi, and welcome to the Let's Talk Melbourne podcast, a place for critical conversation, curiosity, and the big picture from the city of Melbourne. I'm your host, Vikas Raheja, and let's get started. What it means to be a female leader in corporate Australia, the gender bias, pay parity, the pitfalls, the challenges, and the pleasure of it all. Today, we are lucky enough to have an industry veteran with us, and she can provide her expertise in this domain and unpack this a little bit and more. And I would request our guest to introduce herself today, if that's okay.
That is absolutely fine. My name is Alicia Kokocinski, and I'm the General Manager of Marketing and Communications at EQT Trustees. I guess if I was to tell you a bit about myself, I'm a journalist by trade.
Oh, really?
Yes, and a prolific rescuer of dogs. So I have 3 rescues at home at the moment, and the mother of 2 adult daughters.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that you were a journalist in a past life.
I was a journalist in a past life. That was right after I gave up dreams of being a dancer because I was not good enough. And that was probably after... dancer, and also I was very much more interested in sort of creative pursuits. So I landed on writing as the one that could actually earn me money.
Fair enough. Well, welcome to Let's Talk Melbourne, and as I said, we're lucky to have you because we've got a lot of questions to ask you.
Thank you.
I think we want to start off with one of the things which I also spoke to on the guest visit. Is it really? We know it's hard for women in corporate Australia to make a mark for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But can you help us understand how hard that is from your personal experience or observations? And what I want to really unpack is that do women or even men have to grapple with gender bias? Is this something that is conditioned so strongly in corporate Australia that that's something that we have to grapple with on a daily basis?
It's a good question because I think, like with many environments, there is, corporate environments have particular hallmarks and suit some people more than others. So, there can be, I think, challenges for anybody if you don't sort of fit that sort of corporate aspirational idea of who you are, and if that's that sort of way of being in the world doesn't come naturally to you. Obviously, as with many of the structures that we have in our community there, they were established by men and suited men in the way they were structured. So there are a lot of aspects of it that are, less comfortable as a woman coming into that often what feels like a male space and has all the hallmarks of being set up to take care of, the comfort, if you like. So, a really great example that often comes up is about the air conditioning levels in buildings are set to sort of male temperatures and wearing a suit and jackets and things like that. And women tend to have, need sort of warmer environments to maintain sort of body temperature. So there's all those sorts of, things that make it, sort of clearly not necessarily a space built for us.
And do you find that frustrating? Or, so if I had to spin that a bit, but do you find that somehow, and the reason I ask this is because I've had very lucky enough to have some amazing bosses over the years who are female. And I always see them working twice as hard as their male counterparts. And I always feel that they are overcompensating. And not because it's someone's asking them to necessarily, but they do feel like, it's something that they just have to do. Or am I wrong in my observation there?
I think it's definitely true. My observation and my experience is definitely that as a general rule, women tend to work sort of twice as hard to achieve the same kind of cut through, if you like.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to articulate what that looks like in practice because, often it'll be, we're all in a room, everyone gets a say, nothing like that happens here in terms of that sort of difference. But it's just always in the subtle pieces of whose voice carries
weight, yeah.
and whose words get repeated by the most dominant person in the room, for example.
Yeah.
And how an idea can be, and this is anybody who cares to observe it will see it happen. A woman will articulate an idea in a meeting, for example. It sort of goes nowhere, then it gets picked up by a male voice in the room, and then suddenly it becomes a thing.
An important thing.
Yeah.
Or something that requires attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. It's just, I find it frustrating, so I can only appreciate how frustrating it will be.
I think also there's, I think women are kind of socialised to, like, we're brought up in a whole social structure, so you can't kind of shrug that off, and neither neither gender can, if you like. So we're kind of socialised to accept that, we have to work harder to, to be noticed, and that there are certain things that we will be noticed for more easily than others. And, so there's a lot of, I guess, struggling with that in your own mind, as well as what might seem apparent.
Fair enough. One thing which I wanted to ask you and was interested to get your thoughts particularly on this, because you're obviously general manager, well regarded and well respected.
Thank you.
And how do you respond to the word boss lady? Now, the reason I ask is because I feel the word boss lady has been co-opted by interested parties to sort of make it sound like, there's like a negative connotation towards it, or there's this whole thing about, I mean, business kind of thing. But then there's this view, which is a very popular but a very now become a minority view, is that embrace being a boss lady because don't care about anything else. So what are your thoughts on this term and its usage in either corporate Australia or in culture more broadly speaking?
So that was a really interesting question, and I had a lot of thinking about that. I guess to me, my reflex is it just makes me feel like we've got a long way to go, because if it has to be called out that the boss is a lady,
yeah, exactly.
Why is that important? Like, why is that a part of this conversation? Why is it so unusual that we have to articulate it that way?
Yeah.
I see the point of, like, claiming the term, and I think that that's a natural part of language and I guess re-owning something or taking control back of something, and I think there's a lot of merit in that. But whenever I hear about things like mummy bloggers or boss lady or lady doctor, or,
I know, it's
you're sort of like, what we're clearly, what we're saying to the world is, wow, a woman is doing this job. It's so unusual for a woman to do this job.
I mean, it should be the norm.
Yes. So if we were, if it was just boss or manager or whatever, then you'd sort of go, okay, well, now we're at a point where gender doesn't matter in this.
Yes. Yeah.
But, like, you can't take some of the fun out of it sometimes. Like, sort of co-opting terms, can be sort of ironic. I don't think we're at the ironic stage yet, though.
Okay, that's good to know, because the reason I asked this question was a friend of mine was telling me that she was called a boss lady and she just completely embraced it, and she doesn't really care about what that means. And she embraced it in a manner of saying, yes, I am, so what are you going to do about it? Right? But obviously she is, I think it's also a personality thing, and as you said, it comes down to your personal belief and how you approach the world around you through that belief. So thank you for that thought. Now, marketing is obviously your passion. What is it about marketing that you love doing so much?
I guess the part of marketing that I enjoy most is the communication side of it. And for me, and the reason I've always been drawn to this kind of role, and what kind of drew me to journalism as well, was the the sense that I could translate quite well. So I see a lot of the role, and what it does is taking an idea and making it appeal or be relevant to a group or a group of people or a community that it's supposed to be targeting. And a lot of it is about translation. People will have an idea, or they want to convey something or sell something or pass on information about something. And often those people are experts in what they do, so they come with a sort of a technical understanding and a passion for what they do. But the people that they're trying to get it through to are not necessarily, well, definitely not in that level of sort of commitment to whatever that topic is. And so it's about this sort of this process of translation, and how can we make this work? How can we make the group that we're trying to reach see this, have an open mind to this, and be willing to think about this? And that's what I find fascinating about it, and makes me constantly curious about it and interested in, how are we going to solve this? We've got this highfalutin idea, or an abstract idea, or an idea that is not going to be important to many people. Can we make it? Can we make it relevant? How will we do that? Where will we do that? Who will we do that with?
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And
it's fun.
do you ever get nervous when you in that space where you have to really distill information to communicate, and especially complex or hard information to communicate to all kinds of audiences?
I would say that the thing that makes me most nervous is, so I often feel, and experience has taught me that I'm often right, which is, what happens with experience. That I know when I've got the pitch right for the audience, like when I know how to reach them and when I know what's going to work. And you might be 80% sure, but that's enough. That's going to get you across, and then you tweak it as you go. What makes me nervous is if I've had to really bring the stakeholder along for the journey because they're not comfortable with how it's being pitched, or they've got a very particular idea on what they think will work, or what they think is going to be most important. And so I get nervous if I've brought them along and maybe they've not been, completely sold, but they've kind of gone, okay,
we'll just give in.
Yeah, that makes me nervous that they might go, we still hate it. We hate what you've done. And then it's kind of like no amount of evidence or data is going to counter that sort of idea that really what they were trying to put on the line was something more than the idea or something of themselves. And you've sort of not quite been able to reconcile the two things.
It's interesting you say that, because I worked in marketing, but not obviously in content creation. I was more in strategic side. And just would like to unpack this a bit. So people who, especially like in marketing or marketeers, there is a bit of science as well. There's a bit of data that they look at, and they try and draft the communication. There's a lot of marketing comms testing that goes on and all those sorts of things. And then you've got stakeholders coming in and having a very emotional response and not a logical one. And their belief is that because if I'm reacting to this emotionally, that's how everybody else will react, which is completely unsubstantiated. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's absolutely true.
Tell us more.
So, look, the best way to illustrate that is if the content creation involves something visual, people will load onto any visual everything about themselves that goes on in their remote, which is fine. We all do that. Absolutely true. And right. But what is often really evident is that people aren't very self-aware of the fact of them doing that. And so they miss the bit where they kind of go, okay, well, I'm seeing all of this in it, but I understand that's potentially just me, and that maybe in your testing or whatever you've done. So a really classic example will be, I'm just looking at these papers and you'll have something and they'll go, I really hate yellow. And then they can't get past anything else to do with the thing because they hate yellow.
Because they're stuck on it.
Yeah, and it's like, yellow just reminds me of this brand or that or whatever. And you're sort of like, okay, what are we going to do about this now? Because the yellow is not going to be a problem for our audience.
Exactly.
And I understand where you're making that connection, but it's not a common one, and I'm not quite sure how to say this in the most diplomatic way, and you sort of, you try and use the data and the evidence to go, okay, well, here or there, or, sometimes you just got to go, just trust me on this. It's going to be okay. But yeah, it's a difficult sort of Rubik's Cube to sort of solve
it. Yeah. Which is a good segue into my next question, and which is, and if I may say this, like I've seen you with stakeholders, and you are very calm and collected, and you've measured in your response. Because in my head, I mean, I'm just picturing this, and this must be completely wrong. In your head, you're probably picturing, what a bunch of crap I have to listen to. But on the exterior, you're very, and as I said, correct me if I'm wrong, you're very calm, collected, elegant, and eloquent, and you're like patiently being like, yes, but A plus B equals to C. Is that a right assumption? And if it is, how do you get the gumption to do it?
Firstly, I have to say I really appreciate you saying that about how I might come across. Sometimes in my head, that is not at all what's happening. I'm like screaming on the inside. I think, I guess where I come from most of the time is I'm just thinking I have to tell myself this sometimes. So sometimes in those moments where I'm seeming really calm and something is sort of not going well in a conversation, I have to tell myself in my head, you have to listen, and you have to listen for the bits that are going to be helpful here, and you have to try and see where the other person or people or where the room is coming from to work out what the real problem or issue or where the real sticking point is. Because if you can't do that, then you start talking about the colour yellow. And that's actually not the problem. The problem is often to do with some other association and concern that's going on, that's a much broader one about, oh my God, what if we get confused with this and that, or so-and-so thinks we're really this brand, and then I'll have to answer to these stakeholders, and it's somebody else up the line that they're worried about, or something else that they're worried about. But really trying to unpack it, or at least have some instinct for what is really going on in this conversation. But sometimes you've just got to write it out. Honestly, sometimes people just want to talk and they want to offer opinions and they feel that they need to, and that's great. And sometimes, they just got to talk it through, and it's not necessarily considered opinion. It's one that's come to their mind. They say it. They keep talking about it.
And they just love they love their own voice. And
I think honestly, like when it comes to marketing, communications, any kind of content, if it's visual, whether it's written or whatever, it's the same with like music. It's probably the same with food. Everyone's had food, listened to music, written a sentence, seen a picture, watched a movie, therefore feel that they've got some expertise in that
space.
So, to me, I can always pick an expert in the room, because the more you know, the less confident you are about being able to articulate. So often the people that know the most in the room are the quietest about whatever their subject matter expertise, and they're listening to others. I know. It's
one of those things where, someone sees 10 movies and they suddenly become a movie critic. It's like, I don't think it works that way, but, good on you. And now I just want to sort of get your thoughts. What advice would you give to someone who's A, pursuing a career in marketing, and B, navigating the trenches of corporate Australia? Any pearls of wisdom?
So marketing's a very broad profession. So it's follow your nose on that one. If you think you're interested in marketing, you may be more. I've got a team. I've got people that are more in the design side. I've got people more in the drafting and writing side. I've got people in website, digital, events, sponsorships. So it really depends where your strengths are, and do you like to be around people more, or do you like to be more sort of creating the content? Or do you like more the strategy and how we're going to run things out through different channels and, those sorts of things. So for anyone who's interested in marketing, I would say think about where your strengths are, but good chance you'll be able to try out a lot of those things if you're going in as a sort of a junior in any team anyway. And there's plenty of sort of volunteering type roles you can take up with not-for-profit type organisations that love to have people assist them with promotional kind of activities, so you can sort of, get your sea legs doing some of that stuff. In terms of how to make it, I guess, in corporate, I think there are probably two ways. One's quicker than the other. The quickest way is really to play by the rules.
Yep.
Work out,
What you like.
Yep. And basically play by the rules and be fairly Machiavellian about it. It can be quite a political environment.
Yep.
There are decision makers, there are opinion leaders, there are all those sorts of things, and you can play the game, and you can probably rise through the ranks quite quickly.
Yep.
And people do.
Yep.
The other way is to, I guess, it's harder, but maintain sort of a little bit more of truth to yourself. You'll always, depending on the kind of person you are, I tend to be quite a creative person with a lot of broad interests. So they're not always at home in a corporate environment. So I leave them at the door when I walk in, but I still try and be my authentic self, on the floor. And I guess that's the other way. Be true to yourself, maintain a good sense of self.
Yep.
Try not to worry too much about the people that might have taken the other path, and do a really good job.
Yep.
and find your allies within the organisation and work with them, because there's some great people there that are just like
support you.
Yeah.
And enable you.
That's right.
Yes, yeah.
That's right.
That is excellent advice. Thank you so much for that. Now, we're almost in the last final minutes of the podcast, and we ask all our guests 2 questions. What's the one thing that you love about living in Melbourne?
Mm-hmm. I love that I feel at home here, because I'm first generation Australian, and so I find the fact that I can walk around and feel at home and part of a sort of a broad, not just multicultural community, but diverse on all sorts of levels.
Yep.
And quite embracing of all sorts of difference, I guess.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be the main thing that I love about Melbourne. I feel safe and at home.
Awesome. And what's your anthem song?
Oh.
Do you have one?
Well, it really depends on my mood. So there's one that sometimes goes through my head when I'm having those conversations that are quite frustrating, but I seem calm, which is great, which is Decepticon by Le Tigre, which is quite a frantic, sort of slightly punky song. But anyway, that's not usually my anthem. I would say Xanadu.
Okay. That's a very good song.
Yeah. Madonna is my spirit animal, but Xanadu would be my anthem.
That is a great combination. A good one. There you go. Well, I really appreciate the time you've taken to come on this podcast and talk about it, Alicia. Thank you very, very much. And I'm sure anyone who's listening to it will get a lot of value out of it. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to thank our sponsors, Construct Mart and Floors Trading and Clearance Center, and also let you know that this podcast has been recorded from Image Online Studio in Abbotsford. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on Instagram at Let's Talk Melbourne.